Welcome back to the Stages Podcast, Stage 4. And then what seems, this is what's so crazy about these stages. I mean, you can literally fall asleep for 3 or 4 hours. And then all of a sudden,
controversy.
All hell breaks loose.
It's truly what happened.
Yep.
We were all sitting there going, okay, I mean, we have a lot of things to talk about, insider stuff that happens at the tour, behind the scenes. And in the last seconds, it all goes out the window, and now we've got big headlines. It's a big story.
And controversy is a great word, because I don't think anybody will agree on this. And I know that, you know, we watched it and rewatched it and rewatched it, and in slow-mo and an overhead. And the overhead was a little unclear. The tree, whoever put that tree there,
Lost their job.
You're out. Mother Nature fired. But, you know, we're not going to agree on this. I mean, look, here's a tweet from Rolf Aldag.
Let's paint a picture of what happened, in case someone's tuning into this right now.
And not everybody's watched?
Maybe they haven't had a chance to watch it, and they're just getting the recaps for now. So you've got to describe.
Well, what happens is, well, first of all, I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often. In these crazy sprint finishes where the road is narrow and it's early in the race, these boys are fresh, they are hungry for a stage win. They'll do anything. And so, you know, I guess what really happened was, you know, a half a mile or a kilometer before the main crash that everybody's talking about, there was another crash, which was seemingly sort of benign in the middle of the road. It wasn't but that caused a lot of the other guys to either go down or get held up. So then we're left with really like a 20-man race. And with 200 or 300 meters to go, as the sprint is already at that distance from the line, the sprint is already on, like Donkey Kong. And the Frenchman Demare was clearly going away and was going to win the race, but Mark Cavendish, thought his best line was up the right between Peter Sagan and the barriers, and you know, it just didn't work. It didn't work for him, and then that there becomes the controversy on. Well, there's a few things. Number one, did Sagan move over? The rules say you have to, once the sprint starts, you have to, quote unquote, hold your line.
Okay.
Go straight.
That's the first item of discussion.
That's the problem. And if he's going to get disqualified, and disqualification in this particular instance can be anywhere from, we give you last place on the stage, which means for him, he loses all those points for the green jersey, which he cares about, all the way to, you're kicked out of the race.
Which sounds pretty harsh.
Yeah, he can deal with number one. Number two, obviously, he can't deal with. So issue number one is did he not hold his line? Did he not go straight? Issue two, which everybody's talking about, is the elbow. Did he throw an elbow at Cav? But then there's also this issue, which you see a lot of people talking about, is was Mark Cavendish going to a place that was never gonna open? Right,
you take the whole sprint out of the equation. If you try to go into a hole that isn't there from behind and you go off the road, which is what happened if the barriers weren't there, that's your own problem, right? Yep. It's weird because I don't think Sagan was just, in my opinion, it looks like he's just defending his space.
Right.
When you're in a sprint and people are coming up behind you, don't you naturally kind of put your elbows out to kind of hold your space?
I want to get, before we get to what I think of the crash, I'll give you two widely different views of people that know, right? These are not, at Bike Rider on Twitter talking. I mean, this is, so Magnus Backstedt, a guy that I raced with forever, won some classics. He would be able to watch this and have a pretty well-informed and educated and experienced decision. He says, here's my view. And this is again from Magnus Backstedt. Number one, Sagan closed the gap hard. That wasn't right. Number two, Cav went for the gap that wasn't there. That wasn't right. 1 + 2 = racing incident. So that's, obviously he's taking the position that shit happens. But then you get up here, and then you get to Rolf Aldag, who is Mark Cavendish's director. And he tweets, time to step it up, UCI. The UCI is the governing body of the sport. So he's talking to the commissars. You have a 3-person or whatever person panel that is going to decide whether or not Sagan is eliminated from the race or relegated. All dog, time to step it up, UCI. This was not a race accident. This was violence. Hard to DQ a world champion from the tour, but needs to be done. So that's obviously he has his own personal stake in all of this, but that's a very different opinion. And so, and I've watched this, we've all watched this, and I've been communicating with George Hincapie, try to get his view on what in the mind of a sprinter or a finisher like that, how he views it. He thought it was dirty. The elbow, let's get to, if he moved off the line and the rule says you can't move off the line, then you get relegated. The elbow is what gets you kicked out of the tour. And so, to me, the elbow, if you watch it closely, the elbow came after. Cavendish was already
going down.
He was already on his way to the ground. It would be another thing if clearly the elbow caused him to either go into the barrier or crash but first of all, Sagan sprints, he's always got the elbows out.
Like he looks like the animated cartoon drawing of a sprinter, where it is very bowed up.
Well, you want to be bowed up because you want space. And if you're not bowed up, then somebody's going to take your space.
Right.
And here I'm talking like I've been in there. I mean, I would never ever go in that crowd. But when Cav's going down, I'm not trying to defend anything, but I'm 100% sure that elbow did not cause the crash. And does the elbow, is he trying to stabilize, because he's losing it a little too, is he trying to get his balance? That's the big discussion. That's the big debate.
You know, you said the other day on this podcast that the sprints are scary. That was not your specialty. And it's scary for a reason, because those guys are wired very differently. Not only do they have the leg speed, the kind of track speed, but they have this aggressiveness that they're going to push through and they're going to hold their place.
Yep.
It's like that's why they win, is because they don't let someone come in from behind and just move them out of the way. That's not what they do.
Well, does
that make sense?
Well, it does, and that's when I told you the other day, like, these guys surely must get scared. And then later in the day, which I'm glad he's listening to this podcast, but I get a text from Lawson Craddock. I put it up on my Instagram. He says, sprinters don't get scared. That's next level. Like, how do you not? Whatever. If they don't get scared, then they're out of their mind.
I think they are a bit out of their mind.
They are.
They're like the guys that jump out of airplanes and do all that sort of X game type stuff. They're just wired differently.
Here's the other thing too, and I mentioned this a minute ago. You know, there was already a crash a kilometer before this, so we basically had a 20-man race. If that field is intact and that crash happens, it's not 2 guys on the ground or 3 guys on the
50
ground.
50 guys.
There is a lot of guys on the ground. No telling how many GC guys. No telling how many, other. I mean, there's carnage everywhere with that narrow road.
So the riders in a situation like this, and we'll get to audio clips of both Sagan and Cavendish. When the riders saw there's a couple technical bends there before that sprint. They know it's a narrow sprint. Everybody knows it's going to be a narrow sprint. Do they have a problem before that stage even happens? Like, oh, that sprint's too narrow. This is going to be a mess. I don't know if I'm asking you a tactical question or a governing body question.
No, you're asking me a question. I know what you're asking me. You're asking me if the riders are concerned about a course, a corner, any piece of this route. And it's, again, we're talking 2005 or whatever miles. We're talking a lot of pavement, right? So it's hard, maybe even impossible, to look at every piece of it. Let's just go back to the prologue, right? So the prologue, the course was set, the rain came, the crashes happened, and everybody just goes crazy. How can this happen? And this course wasn't safe, etc. I've said it for years, and I'm going to say it again right here, right now. Until the riders get their shit together and get unified and unionized and get a seat at the table, don't talk about it after. Be at the table that when they're saying, okay, we're going to go left here and right there, and this is the course, and this is how narrow have a seat at the table and say, no, we are not going to do that, actually. We're going to do something very different, because we're the actors in the play, and the actors are the ones that matter the most. Not Christian Prudhomme and Brian Cookson back there sipping champagne. They do not matter.
Do you have any recollections of a protested course where they just...
You know, the most common protest is weather. It's too hot. It's too cold. Very rarely that it's too hot, but it's too cold. It's snowing. It's yeah. Which they should protest that.
See, look at me now being such a media guy. I'm trying to blame the course now. When we started out with who was at fault here, Cavendish or Sagan. Now I'm going after the course. Maybe we just need to leave it up to racing.
Let's not kid ourselves. You could have a perfectly safe course that all the stakeholders have sat down and approved. The governing body, the organizer, the riders, the teams, the sponsors say, okay, check. Perfectly safe course, and you still have what happened. You could have what happened today, right? That's not that you can't control those things. But my point, and I'm going to say two things. One, I say this all the time. The actors in this play, the best cyclists in the world needed union, and I'm not talking like an email address, like I'm going to email the union, like a real union. And so we're addressing safety, we're addressing work conditions, we're addressing pension, we're addressing revenue share. The most important thing is revenue share.
Oh, we might have to dig into that.
That's a whole other episode. But I also want to bring this back to me, and this is a full confession, unlike any other confession. But I probably, if I think back to early 2000s, I probably had the ability and the power and the stroke to galvanize that effort. Other teams, and I wouldn't think about that. And so, but it's going to take somebody to come in and say, no, we are unified, and these are the conditions we want, and if not, we're not playing.
You know, let me put this perspective. I'm thinking about the average person listening to this. They probably do some 50-mile rides in their community, maybe, their country, their state, wherever they live. They they like to get out and maybe mix it up and race amateur level. Maybe they do a triathlon, whatever it is. As a amateur race, every ride or race I've been to, let's just say it's a just a weekend warrior fun ride.
Yep.
Every race I've ever been to or ride, I'm pretty sure someone left in an ambulance. See where I'm going with this? Well, it's just danger. Being on two wheels is just dangerous when you get speed and regard the course, whatever it is. Even at the most simple level, for us weekend warriors, accidents happen.
It does, and that's the nature of this game. I mean, until we put training wheels on everybody, people are going to fall over. We're not advocating for training wheels, but that's an inherent part of this. That's just part of the deal. But that is going to happen in its own way. But let's try to minimize those other factors that could sort of get in the way and create these things. And we almost got off the topic of the real story of the day, but what happened today is what happens in your local criterium or your local road race or what your local triathlon. That happens. But yeah.
You want to hear from the riders?
Let's hear it.
Of course,